So I finally saw the new Baywatch movie. Forever and always, it's always here. So I have been getting asked about this movie since it was like in the concept stages. Like there was an earlier iteration where the main character was like a different guy, and I was getting asked about it then, and I've been asked about it ever since. And I couldn't really say anything about it because I hadn't seen the movie yet. It just came out. So, now that I've actually seen it, I've been able to sleep on it, gather some thoughts, and be able to come up with a concise review of the film. I am 100% behind a Baywatch movie being made, because now it's in the pop culture forefront again, and that means more Baywatch stuff, and more people are talking about it, and more people will view my show Baywatching. That being said, this movie has kind of put me on a roller coaster. Because when I first heard about it, that was my feelings. Just, I'm glad that they're making it, this could be fun. I want to see a different interpretation of Baywatch. And then when the trailer came out, I thought it was alright. And my thinking was, I want to be open-minded about this. There's some parts of it that I didn't like, but I wanted to be not so cynical about it. Like, I want to be, okay, once the movie comes out, then I'm going to judge. I'm going to reserve judgment from the movie came out. And that lasted about 2 seconds until I watched the Red Band trailer of it. And the Red Band trailer includes more of the raunchier stuff in it, and includes the same scenes, but with the swearing kept in. And I'm not a prude, guys. It's not like I don't swear all the fucking time in this show. But I don't feel like just swearing or just being crass should be the extent of a joke. I don't like when movies are lazy about it and lean on it so much. And it is a kind of comedy that I'm really sick of right now. And that's what it was looking like. So the more that I was hearing about it and the more press was coming out, the less good I felt about it, until I got to the point where in the Smokey and the Bandit midnight screenings I said it was gonna fucking blow. And I feel kind of bad for saying that, because once I saw the actual movie, it was not as bad as that. Overall, I'm really mixed. I am mixed on this movie. I can't say that I hated it. It didn't fucking blow. But I can't say that I loved it either, because it was like several different movies all together. And so there were pieces of it that were really great. And then there were other pieces of it that were just awful and exactly what I thought it was going to be. Would I call it a good movie? No. It wasn't a good movie. But would I call it a really bad movie? Not that either. And a lot of the reviews for this are consistent with my feelings in that it's very tonally inconsistent. It's got a lot of different elements to it, and there are a lot of parts of the movie that don't seem to be connected to the others. They seem like completely different characters. However, that is kind of true to Baywatch, because Baywatch is a very tonally inconsistent show. You can pull any sort of plot element and add it to this movie, and it wouldn't be out of line with things that have actually happened on Baywatch. In fact, that kind of ties into something else that bothered me about the movie, in that I don't feel like they went ridiculous enough with it. I feel like they played it safe, which sounds weird because there are a lot of really raunchy scenes in this, but I do feel like plot-wise they played it safe. If you're gonna do a Baywatch plot, and point out how ridiculous Baywatch is, because it is a ridiculous show, you need to go really over the top with it. And I don't feel like they quite got there. And I'm fine with the main characters being a little more grounded. There's humorous aspects to them, certainly. But you need to juxtapose that with the ridiculous plot elements of it. And the villain and the main plot are not very strong. And I'm gonna say this right now, there's gonna be spoilers for the movie. I think I've been a little light on stuff, so I don't think I've covered any huge plot elements, but just so you know, there's gonna be spoilers in this. The villain is Vanessa Leeds, I want to say is the character's name, and she runs a club called the Huntington, which, actually now that I think about it, might have been the club from the show? They might have had a club called the Huntington. Regardless, it doesn't really have anything to do with what's happened on the show. she is making some drugs. This is like a front for like a drug running scheme, and the lifeguards are trying to catch who is distributing these drugs on the beach and also murdering people. They gotta solve murders on the beach. Which sounds more ridiculous than it is. The villain, she's very understated. I feel like I like the core concept of it, just not the execution. Because they made it a lady villain, and she has lines about how if she were a man, you would call her driven, and, you know, she would be doing all this stuff, and, like, they're sort of taking a feminist stance with it, I guess. And if you're going to be doing a Baywatch movie, it's nice that they tried to do that with a female character, but there just wasn't a lot behind it. There wasn't anything very interesting about her. She wasn't particularly scary or entertaining. The scenes with the main characters were fine, but when it was by herself, I didn't feel like I was watching much of anything. And when she blows up at the end, that's how they kill her. They blow her up with fireworks. She says her last line like the worst delivery possible. Like, Mitch gives this big speech, and she says, "Oh, how tacky," and then gets blown up. But not even as good as I said it just then, not trying. It was weird as a last line. So I don't know really about how strong this aspect of the plot was. I thought that they had some good comedic leads in it. Dwayne Johnson is really funny. Zac Efron's really funny. But there's parts of it that felt like Neighbors Light, with Zac Efron's character, where it wasn't quite there. Because Neighbors was another movie I liked more than I thought I would, and I thought it was pretty funny. His character in that is sort of a douche bro who is really, really stupid. And the lines that were the funniest in that movie were about how dumb he was. And there was shades of that here in Baywatch, but not enough for you to remember this was a character trait. Just occasionally he would say something stupid, and you'd be like, oh yeah, he's supposed to be stupid. The lead female characters in this, I don't feel like had enough to do. I don't feel like their characters were built up enough, which sounds weird when you're talking about Baywatch, but Baywatch had character traits for these characters that they're named after, that they don't capitalize on. So I guess before I get too deep into that, I'll talk about what you really want to hear is, was this like Baywatch? And the answer is sometimes. Sometimes it was like Baywatch, and it did more than I was giving it credit for. But for the most part, it's mostly doing its own thing. They've got characters from the show in it. They got Dwayne Johnson playing Mitch Buchanan. Zac Efron is playing Matt Brody, who is David Charvet's character, who I called Eyebrows on Baywatching. And they've got Stephanie Holden, Summer Quinn, Captain Thorpe, CJ Parker, Garner Ellerby, and I think that's the extent of the characters that they included. And for the most part, they're in name only. The female characters, like I said, were not given much of anything to do, which was unfortunate. Summer got to do some stuff, but personality-wise, I really didn't get a lot from her. She was mostly there to be Zac Efron's love interest. And even then, there wasn't a lot to that. Stephanie's character started out with shades of the character from Baywatch. They did say things like she was the best lieutenant and she should have been given the job, and things like that, where she's not appreciated as much. So there's some of that aspect, but other than that, she's just sort of there to prop up Mitch Buchanan's character. And I liked that they cast a black woman to play Stephanie, because unlike Baywatch, the Baywatch movie had more than one main cast member who wasn't white. So it was more progressive than that. But what I didn't like about that with the Stephanie character was that it seemed like they just did that because she's a love interest for The Rock. Which I don't like that either. I don't like the obligation they have to be the same race aspect either, because I feel like that shouldn't be the reason that they're doing that. It should be because, you know, you're casting more people of more colors, and not just obligation. But then it was kind of dumber than that, because they just have one scene where they make out, and then other than that, she's just sort of a blank slate. So they really didn't do anything. And that was kind of worse. As far as the most faithful characters, I feel like Mitch was the most spot on, which was the most important one, because he is the main character of Baywatch, the show and the movie. He has sort of an ego about him. He's always doing the saves, and they have this bit at the beginning of the movie where they're just, he's just passing by all of the people they've saved. Like, there's these guys playing basketball, and they're like, oh yay, save my sister's life, yeah, I'll owe him everything, and it going by a bunch of people that, oh, you saved my sister's life, so I'm gonna make some sand sculptures of you, or I don't know why it's always sister, I don't know, I'm sure there was something else there. But, so basically, it was true to that character that he's this larger-than-life person. And also, I thought they were gonna go more of the womanizer route with him, but they didn't, which was great, because even though Mitch on the show is very much a womanizer, I didn't like that the trailers were focusing on a lot of the sexual aspects of it, and not the funniest parts of Baywatch, which was the juxtaposition of the fan servicey, sexy parts with the family-friendly image of the show. And they would have these special plots that would involve, like, Hobie's drinking with friends, and Hobie's getting in trouble, or Mitch has got to help, like, a young teenager in need. There's some troubled youths. And there were bits of that there. Mitch loves kids in this, and even though he doesn't have a kid of his own in this one, he has a lot of parts of it where he's very kind to children, and he's just sort of the greatest guy. And there was a part that I thought was particularly funny where he and one of the bad guys are fighting in a child's bedroom, and they're throwing, like, baby stuff at each other, like baby powder in the guy's eyes. And the guy is picking up a photo. He's like, no baby photos, no baby photos, let's have some class here. And that was really funny. As far as Zac Efron's character playing Matt Brody, the only thing really taken from the Matt Brody character in the show is that he drives a motorcycle. That's about it. So he doesn't have any of those aspects, but he's sort of an amalgam of a lot of different characters they had on the show. And it was always like those lead character brunette guys that would be brought in to sort of replace each other. So they had that aspect. He was called Matt Brody, and he was a rookie that comes in, and that's about it. He's raised in foster homes, and broke and homeless, and sleeping under one of the towers, which is very Eddie Kramer, kind of that pathetic aspect of him. And he's an Olympic swimmer, which is very much a Cody thing. So he's got kind of those aspects blended in together. And I felt like he was suitable for what it was. Like, I'm not particularly tied to Matt Brody's character, so I was fine with what they were doing with that. Captain Thorpe's character was nothing like Captain Thorpe, and there's like a twist about him being corrupt in the end, so that was just a name thing. And Garner Ellerby is in this, and I thought they had the essence of him pretty well, in that he has this begrudging relationship with the lifeguards that kind of frustrates him. And some of the funniest parts of the movie were when he was angry at them for trying to get involved with criminal investigations, but they're lifeguards. And that I had in the trailer the part about lifeguard pursuit. There's no fucking thing as lifeguard pursuit! And that was really funny, and I'm glad that they touched on that aspect of the show, and that there was a lot of things Baywatch did that lifeguards would not do. I felt like maybe they leaned on it a little too heavily, because they said a lot of that same line without variation there. So I feel like they had a good idea with lifeguards aren't supposed to do this, but maybe not base so much of the character-driven points about it, because then it got old pretty fast. They have a part where they're describing several Baywatch plots, and some of them were a little generic, so I don't know if they were specific to particular episodes, but they had ones like they talked about diamonds and a surfboard, which was verbatim a plot from Baywatch. And then they had Matt Brody describing what they should have done. Like, oh, well, there's a school of manta ray. Well, you just call animal control. Like, just call the police in this situation. Do this. Like, why are you doing this? And that made me laugh. There's parts of this movie too where it was written like, I feel like it's something that I would have written if I were doing a Baywatch movie. There's a part where The Rock and Zac Efron are on a tower, and Zac Efron's watching a girl with binoculars, and Mitch just goes like, are you gonna go talk to her like a real man, or are you gonna just sit here watching her like a creepy creeperton? A creepy creeperton's such a me thing to say, so that felt like something that I would have done. There were parts of the movie that I really, really laughed at, where Matt Brody, he has Olympic medals, and to prove that he's not just about himself, he throws one of the medals into the ocean. And then Mitch just goes, oh, that's polluting. And that felt true to the show. There were things I felt like they could have played with more. And I don't think this is because they needed to be a true Baywatch adaptation. Because if this movie was super funny, I wouldn't have cared if it was that close to the show, because it's not like this is sacred material that they are working with. But it wasn't funny enough to be like, okay, well, it wasn't like Baywatch entirely, but it was still a good movie. But the parts that I feel like they should have played with more, that could have been funny, there were character traits they could have taken, especially for the women, and played with that to give them more of a character. CJ's character is in this, Pamela Anderson's character. And she does next to nothing except just be the hot chick for the kind of loser guy in the group who is a new character. And it felt like kind of a waste, because Pamela Anderson's character, she was very hippie, new agey, very into the environment, very about social issues. And they could have used that as an element of the character and of the plot. You know, like she could have been against oil drilling, or like save the whales, or something like that, to give her something else other than hot chick. Stephanie Holden's character, she's a very know-it-all, competitive person, and they could have played with that, and they didn't really. Summer was given nothing, but she had things to do more than the other ones, but as far as her personality, she didn't do a lot of the things that Summer would do, but I don't know if Summer was really the best character to play with anyway. I know they used her because that was Matt's love interest for a while, but she was just sort of sad a lot of the time, and had a lot of bad things happen to her. Poor Summer. The parts that I really, really disliked about this movie were the really crass parts of it, where they were just trying to be like the 21 Jump Street reboot, or something like that. They have a lot of dick jokes. They have lines about like, what are your balls saying? My balls are saying to go in, or my balls are saying don't, and let's be safe. And a lot of just gross out humor. Like when they're in the morgue, they're hiding in the drawers, and a bunch of liquid fat is dripping on top of Zac Efron from one of the corpses. Just there to be gross. And that's the scene where you might have heard about it in some of the press, where he is just repeatedly playing with a corpse's balls. And it's just supposed to be funny because he doesn't want to touch balls. And that's about it. And they do have some shades of no homo in this, but I guess it's not really anything farther than what they did on the show. So I guess I can't complain too much about that. There is an extended scene in this where one of the characters gets his dick stuck in the slats of a chair. And it was stupid anyway, but it would have been funnier if it hadn't just gone on forever. Like if it had ended where he asks his friend to push the dick through the slats and he goes like, mm-mm. That would have been the perfect ending to that, but it just keeps going, where CJ comes over and is trying to get him out, and then Mitch comes over, and then like there's a whole crowd, and then this just keeps going forever and has no basis on the plot. It has no real reason to be there other than dicks are funny. And this was not just the start of the scene getting his dick stuck in the slats of the chair. This was the middle of the scene, because it starts with him being hot for CJ, and then he starts choking on food, and then CJ has to give him the Heimlich, and they have like an extended shot of her ass in slow-mo, and then he falls over on the chair, and it keeps going for ages. I guess I'll give the movie credit for not having an extended party scene where someone gets high, and it's just funny because they're high. They do have a party scene, but at least they didn't do that because I don't know, there's a lot of really overused stuff in a lot of comedies now. I didn't like that sometimes the characters were just assholes to be assholes. When Mitch and Stephanie first start talking to Matt, they're just like being a dick to him for no reason. Like they're like, oh, pretty boy thinks that he doesn't need to audition to be a rookie. He thinks that he's just gonna come in here and do whatever he wants. And they're acting very bro-y about it. And he hasn't done anything to justify it yet. Like if he had been acting like he does in the rest of the movie, he's a very douchey character, then maybe. But they just start off that way. And I'm like, so all the lifeguards are just assholes? They're just assholes to everyone? Why? But they're not like that in every scene. So, that makes it very weird. They have cameos in this by David Hasselhoff and Pamela Anderson. And the David Hasselhoff cameo is very funny. He comes in and he is The Rock's mentor. And he tells him, you know, to get it together and he should get back on the lifeguard team and all that. Because this is the very sad part of the movie where he's been thrown off the force. And they told him to turn in his trunks, and that was funny too. And I think maybe a joke I've made on Baywatch, on Baywatching. David Hasselhoff is there, and it turns out that he is also Mitch Buchanan. So they're talking to each other like, oh, thanks, Mitch. Yeah, no problem, Mitch. And that was really funny. But that drove the plot forward a little bit, and the Pamela Anderson cameo, you're waiting for it through the whole movie, and I knew that these would just be cameos. Like one scene things, because that's how it is in all of these remakes. And I was waiting for Pamela Anderson to show up. I'm like, so when's it gonna be like the wah wah? And it wasn't until the very end where they're like, oh, we have this Lieutenant Casey Jean coming in, which is what CJ stands for. And they bring her in and she's just in slow-mo. And then the scene cuts away and nothing happens. Like you're waiting for like, okay, when's the funny thing gonna happen? And then it doesn't. She's just there. It's just an obligation thing. They did nothing with it. I was confused. It was lazy. I do like though that apparently in this universe, like history is repeating itself. Like there's more than one Mitch Buchanan and more than one CJ Parker, so they just keep like on a loop. Like all of the characters in regular Baywatch exist, but also the movie characters exist. What is happening on this beach? If I were going to do this movie, I think I would have amped up some of the more ridiculous aspects of it, because I don't think anyone was coming to watch this movie to see like a really grounded movie. I'm not saying that they should be stupid about it. I feel like they should have been smarter than the source material, and for the most part they were. But they weren't smart enough about it to feel like you're watching a good movie. It feels very lazy at parts. It feels like some of the jokes are just gimmies. They do the slow motion joke twice. 3 times actually, because I think with their original CJ character, the one from the main part of the movie, they do the slow motion joke with her a couple times before they do the Pamela Anderson slow motion joke. And that's just the extent of it. And those are jokes people were making in the 90s. Those were jokes that people were making that had never watched Baywatch. Because a lot of people, if you haven't seen it, that's all you think about is just the slow motion women. But there were a lot of other aspects to it that were really funny. And it was funnier than the Baywatch movie was. I've laughed so much more at normal Baywatch than I did at the comedy version of Baywatch. They listed some other stuff from the show, like the sand grifters, which they don't call them on Baywatch, sand grifters, but with the cooler that has a trap on the bottom of it, that was something verbatim from Baywatch. And those are kind of sprinkled in, and if they'd done more of that, like, I don't know, maybe if they based the plot around some ridiculous environmental scheme, like they're gonna pollute the ocean and they're covering it up by training sharks to attack people. If they had just focused more on the aspect of like, rookies have a lot to learn. There's a lot of things about being a lifeguard that you don't know. And then it turns out this ridiculous plot happening is what you had to learn. Like, oh yeah, I guess like people can, there's such a thing as secondary drowning, or you can be killed in the water yourself, or all the rescues don't always work out. Sometimes people die later. All those things to learn, but no, it's not that. Sometimes people got super intelligent sharks that want to attack you. Sometimes there's aliens. Sometimes there's diamond surfboards. Sometimes Geraldo Rivera shows up on the beach. Sometimes they're filming a show within a show. Sometimes they're having the Special Olympics. Just any sort of things that they could have taken from the show that were more interesting than what they did with the main plot of it. I don't know if the movie should have been a hard R. There were parts of it that I did laugh at because it was an R-rated movie, like when Garner is chewing them out and just cussing up a storm at them. But there were other aspects of it, like I feel like if I was reading the script it would be funny, but in the movie it's not. It's just stupid. They could have amped up Mitch's character even more. The fact that he's always cooking meat products, the fact that he has a son that he's always kind of making him do stuff for him, his son that's hanging out with the wrong crowd, his ex-wife, some of those aspects of it. I thought they didn't include that because they wanted to do a love story with him, but they didn't. Which I did appreciate that it wasn't just focused on Mitch getting with a lady. I did appreciate there wasn't a huge focus on the romantic aspects of the movie. But they didn't, I don't know, they just focused on the one aspect that lifeguards don't do this stuff and didn't give him a lot with a lot else with his personal life, I guess. Though they did add some other stuff, like he has like a tiny Mitch Buchanan in a fish tank. That's such a Mitch thing to do, like to have like a little mini version of himself, which inexplicably changes throughout the movie depending on his mood. There were no Baywatch Nights jokes in this, which I would have expected, especially considering that the plot involves lifeguards doing PI business. But maybe they thought that was too low-hanging fruit. Maybe they could have focused on some of the supernatural elements of the show. Sometimes there's ghosts. Why not? Overall, I wouldn't say it was a good movie. I wouldn't say it was a bad movie, but I wouldn't say it was a good movie either. So if you want to know what my recommendation is, if you're curious about it, rent it. I don't know if it's worth going to the theater. There were parts of it that I thought was a funny movie, but this movie is 2 hours long, and there's a huge aspect of it that I didn't like, so it's very mixed. But if you're a hardcore Baywatch fan, there's some things there. If you're following just Baywatching and you're curious if there's some aspects of the show in it, there is. But overall, I would just say, like, give it a rental if you're curious. If you're really sold on the trailer, you'll probably like the movie, but sort of up in the air. Anyway, that is my final thoughts on the Baywatch movie. I am putting out a new batch of Baywatching episodes soon. They've been on my Patreon early access for a little bit, and they should be going public very shortly. And I'll be continuing with more of the Baywatch stuff. We're coming up on Baywatch Nights very soon, which is really cool. I'm excited to get to that. And I will do proper Baywatching on the Baywatch movie, so if you want to wait and see when that comes out on DVD, I will do a proper edited video of that talking about it, so that'll be coming soon. So anyway, I think that's all I gotta say about the Baywatch movie. Make your own call there. Bye!